pioneers in how I got into this subject, really. It really was the book, The Sun and the Serpent, which opened up this whole story for me. And if I hadn't read that book, no way would I be here today. It gave me a real insight into how the past was, rather than, like I mentioned at the start of the conference, lists of kings and queens and who won the wars. Because I think history is a whole different level to that, which a lot of people never even hear about the good stuff. You guys are lucky, I guess. And so I really do respect Hamish and his work, and I wish I could have been at the tribute to him yesterday, but obviously we were doing Megalithomania. I really feel he is watching over us. He was here with us in 2008. He spoke about the stone people of New Zealand and the sort of cathartic experiences he had there, and is very influential on a lot of us younger Earth Mysteries people and older Earth Mysteries people, I assume. And so I'll hand you over now to Nigel Twinn, who's written this amazing biography of his life. And after that, we're going to go straight into the speakers forum. So if you have any questions you want to sort of gather in your minds, don't make lists, please. We haven't got that long. Then we'll go straight into the forum after this. So please give a warm welcome to Nigel Twinn.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me all right? Excellent. Until a few days ago, I didn't even know I was going to be here. So this is something that I've put together to some extent at the last minute, but nonetheless, it's a presentation that I did to one of the British Society Dowsers conferences a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed to go down well there. So I hope you enjoy it too. Basically, my involvement in all this started 3 or 4 years ago. In that Hamish, every time I had an interchange of ideas with Hamish, either by email or on the phone or in writing, he always finished his end of the conversation by saying, "You should write a book. You should write a book." And every time I used to sort of go back to him with the same little mantra that said, "Well, I'd like to write a book, but I haven't got any material." And we had this little ping pong going on for quite a long time, really. And then about a year ago, spring of last year, he wrote to me again, just about an everyday thing about the Merivale Stone Circle, where we've both done a lot of work. And right as a throwaway on the bottom of his email, he said, "Oh, and by the way, I've got between 3 months and 3 years to live. Thought I'd better let you know that." And suddenly a little light went on in my head, and I thought, oh, God, this is the book that he's been talking about. You know, I'm supposed to be writing about Hamish Miller. And so we got together in the summer of last year, and it was always on the cards that he wouldn't see the final version, but his instruction to me was that if he didn't get to see it right at the end, that wasn't Hamish, by the way, that I was to get it out as soon as possible after his demise. And as many of you know, he died in January this year. A lot of us would have liked to have seen him hang about a lot longer, but I think at the end of the day we were just very, very privileged to have worked with him over such a long period of time. I was particularly fortunate in the fact that over the last 7 months I saw him very regularly, and there will be many people in this room today who actually knew him better than I did. That concentrated period where he was talking about himself and his ideas and what he wanted to see in the future was absolutely priceless, and I don't mean that in a value sense of the word. I'm now going to operate this, and nothing happened. I'm going to operate it again. Help! Is it that way? Sorry, I do apologise. I'm sorry it's a little bit faint. I'll read it out to you. One of the great things about Hamish was that he did so many things, but he did them with such style. He did them in spades. He was an author, he was a blacksmith, a very competent dowser, a very well internationally known furniture designer, which not everybody knows. He was an engineer by trade. He certainly did a huge amount of healing quietly. He was a great philosopher, and something that I think that we'll only start to sort of really understand and recognize as the years go by. He was quite a competent sailor, although he did manage to sink a boat. It's in the book. He was a wonderful sculptor, and of course, as many of you know, he started the Parallel Community in 2006, so he was really tried to translate his philosophy into practice as a social activist, and he planted a hell of a lot of trees, and he was very proud of that. But he was what the Greeks would have called a polymath. He was somebody who did a lot of things, very wide spectrum, from the elemental blacksmith work right through to the most esoteric of philosophical ideas, and he did them very, very well. But he had one of his great traits was that he had a whole string of attempts at killing himself, basically. This was actually the first one. That's a drawing by a guy called Neil Barlow of a mountain near where he grew up in southern Scotland called the Cobbler. And he managed to fall off a ledge right at the top of the mountain. He fell a very long way. He fell into the one little bit of snow that was deep enough to break his fall. And as he fell down, he felt himself go out of his body. At the time, he wasn't actually terribly surprised. After all, the first time this happens to you when you're a youngster, it doesn't mean a lot to you. That's obviously what happens when you do that sort of thing. And so he sort of parked that to one side, and only later in his life did he come back to it. What was remarkable about Hamish was that in about 1980, he was actually a very well-known and very wealthy businessman. Now, those of you like me and most people in this room who didn't know him back in his old days will only know him as being very genial, very generous, very laid back. But actually, he had another life before he became the older Hamish that we all know and love. And he was actually a very well-known businessman and an internationally renowned furniture designer. This is actually his factory in Sussex in 1980. Can you imagine the Hamish of later years being that sort of person? But the reason that happened was that he had what is known, as all of you will know, a near-death experience. In 1982, he was treated for acute diverticulitis. He spent 7 hours on the theatre slab being operated on, and at the end of that, the surgeons walked away saying, well, it was a pity we were too late, chaps. And he saw them walk away, and he drifted away, and only later on, obviously, was he brought back to life, if that's the right phrase, but it did change his world totally and utterly. His one recollection of that period, that near-death experience, was this one, which is a drawing of the tunnel, which he saw himself drifting up. Now, bear in mind that we all, I think, create our own reality. I did joke with him that it was very much a furniture designer's sort of tunnel made of aluminium plates with rivets in the corner. And I thought, well, as Stairways to Heaven go, that was, I don't think it would be my view of the afterlife, but there we go. But, and he saw the humorous side of that. He was a great joker, a very humorous and genial person. But after that, he did take a completely different track. His wife, Bar, described it as a complete and utter transformation of Hamish the man. This is an early picture of him, and anybody recognise the other person? Excellent, fine. No, that's astonishing. That's Hamish met up with Colin Bloy, but they were both sort of based in Sussex at the time, and Colin became Hamish's mentor, I think is the right sort of phrase. But just as Colin didn't want to be anybody's guru, he didn't want to set off a new religion, and he really didn't want to be the front man, Hamish, I have to say, was very much the same, and it was his same view. And he's left me with two batons, really. One is to get his word out to a much wider audience, and whilst most of you in this audience will have heard of him, will be on the same track, I've got to try and sort of spread that much wider, which is quite a challenge. The other thing he's left me with is to take that I take the same view of him as he did of Colin, and he always described himself as an ordinary bloke. He didn't want to be a saint, and I've got to stop people canonizing him after his death. So that's an interesting sort of conundrum to deal with. As you can see, Hamish still retains some of his better workwear once he became a dowser. The thing that Colin opened his mind to was very much the idea that you could heal the earth, and through healing the earth, you could heal the people and places and the fauna that lived on it. Hamish became, as you know, a very internationally renowned dowser. At the time that Hamish started dowsing, it was a very niche subject, mainly, almost exclusively about water divining. But Hamish's involvement with dowsing inspired a whole generation. Several of them are in this room today, and I'm very pleased to say that I'm one of them. It inspired a whole range of people, not only to take up dowsing, but to widen the whole field of where dowsing can lead. Hamish, in his own words, actually said all he did was open a few doors, but I think probably it was a little bit more than that. One of the most important things, I think, in Hamish's discoveries was the idea that the earth is actually listening and responding. Now, although we have all come to this in our different ways, prior to Hamish, and you've got to think yourself back sort of 20, 30 years, the idea that you could go out and talk to the earth and it would respond, and you could measure it with rods, would have been completely off the wall, completely out of the question, not even on the radar. And yet, this is the Merivale Stone Circle nearby to where I live. When you go to Merivale, you can measure the energy coming out of the circle before you start. You can measure it at the end, and obviously it's gone up in the meantime. And in 2005, both Hamish and I, quite independently, measured the increase in the energy of that stone circle during the dancing for the Beltane sunrise. I have to say that in all the years that I've lived in Tavistock, which goes back a very long way, we've never seen the sun on the morning of Beltane, and indeed not much other time either. But certainly you can feel the energy rise with the arrival of the dancers, and you can see it continue to rise during the dancing, and you can measure it as it drops away again afterwards. And that was a revolution, not so much in practice, but in thought. The very idea that it could happen and that people could deal with it and measure it. Hamish himself wrote his own autobiography, It's Not Too Late, but he actually wrote this thinking he'd done everything he was likely to do, and it was getting towards the end of his time anyway. And this was in the mid-90s, and this was actually released in 1998. But he realised that it was probably a bit premature, bearing in mind that in It's Not Too Late, he'd only got to starting the work on the Dance of the Dragon. So he'd done The Sun and the Serpent, which probably most people know about. The Dance of the Dragon was underway. Ahead of him was all the work that he did in the Southern Hemisphere, which Hamish rightly talked about a little while ago, and a lot of the consideration of his ideas was yet to come. So there was a lot to do. There was a need to update It's Not Too Late, and A Life Divine is intended to be just that. It's a second volume, a sequel, if you like. But Hamish himself was, in his latter years, was actually more proud of the fact that he had translated at least the essence of his ideas into practical action. He was very much a down-to-earth man, a very ordinary bloke in his own phraseology. I don't think he was quite that ordinary, but I understand what he meant. He wasn't somebody who lived out in the ether. He was somebody who worked and dealt with things day to day in the world. He established the Parallel Community in 2006. The Parallel Community Day, if that's the right phrase, was held yesterday when we launched the book. And the idea of the Parallel Community is it draws together all the disparate alternative groups around the world so that they can draw strength from one another and that they can produce something that will change the way in which we look at the world. And obviously there are all sorts of factors happening, as a lot of you will know, but the Parallel Community is one of those things that draws together these groups and hopefully sets up something that can challenge big business and big politics, but from a grassroots level. Hamish himself, I think, would strangely actually most like to be remembered for his blacksmith work. It was the one thing in his life that he'd always wanted to do. He had a boyhood ambition to be a blacksmith. He had some training from one of his employees in the factory, but really the standard and the quality of the output of his forge was something that was quite remarkable for somebody who was effectively a self-taught blacksmith. In the book we show some of the examples, and there are others on his website, but he was he was a very, very accomplished blacksmith and sculptor. The book itself, we worked together on for 7 months. We actually knew that he probably wouldn't get to the end, so we actually sort of wrote it backwards. We're not talking about acrylic writing here. We actually started at the far end, just in case he wasn't about to finish the first bit, which I could probably have got from somewhere else. But Hamish himself was very determined to get as much as he could of his own words down on paper, but he didn't want to spend the last few months of his life working on the past, because he was still looking to the future. He still had things to do, people to meet, organisations to talk to, ideas to expound. And so what I was doing was the spade work, and it was me that I was just supporting him in his work. In the end, of course, we both ended up with our names on the cover. He insisted on having my name on the cover because it was my book and he was just helping me, and I insisted on having his name on the cover because it was his book and I was helping him. But I outlived him, so he's got a bigger sort of wording on the top, and he would have appreciated that. He would have found that most amusing. Throughout the whole process, one of the things I think that you have to say about Hamish is that he had a very positive view of life, but he also loved to laugh. Whenever you were with him, everything seemed to be. You could see the humorous side of everything. And in the first draft of this book, where I'd taken all his words down by dictaphone and I translated them onto paper, I actually put laughter, all the times he laughed. But of course, most of the people who read this book in the years ahead won't know the man, and I think that would have been a bit irritating for them. But I had to put some of them back because the way in which he approached his life was that he laughed at the things that went well, the things that went badly. When he was left penniless and he appeared to be at his lowest ebb, Hamish was still laughing. And I think that was a wonderful way to remember a man. There are the details of A Life Divine are various there, and as you say, they are actually on the stand outside, and I'll go back afterwards and sign any that anybody wants to buy. So, thank you very much. Obviously, I could talk all night about Hamish Miller, as you probably gather, and it's become something of my specialist subject. But it is. I've taken up the torch. Well, I think it was thrust into my hand actually. But anyway, I haven't put it down, and I want to carry forward the work that he was doing to explain it to a wider audience. So, thank you very much for that. Look.
Thank you very much, Nigel. That's a really beautiful tribute to him. So we're now going to move swiftly into the Speakers Forum. So I'd like to invite the speakers up to the stage, please. Not all of them. Yeah, I mean, if everyone could move forward, because, so we can get a bit closer. And we're going to pass a mic around for anyone who would like to ask questions too. Usually we have John Martineau doing this job, but he's at a wedding this weekend. So it's now mine. So please, do you want to come and join us on the stage? If you could bring the other chair up there. So we have Anthony Thorley, Francine Blake, and our guest Robert Temple. And Antoine Gagar, is she in here? And Michael Tellinger, Walter Cruttenden. You join us on the stage, please, and Andrew Collins. Are they skiving? Could we dim the lights slightly, please?
I didn't do it, honest.
Huh? No, it's okay. You sit down there. Who needs to? Cool. We're slowly getting here. Hi, Antoine. So now's the time to think of any questions. If anyone's got any sort of insights or any questions for the speakers that they've thought about over the weekend, I personally found it riveting, and it's been a pleasure to host all these amazing speakers, and so hopefully we can sort of get yet more insights at this forum. Is Michael Tellinger in the audience? Obviously not. And Walter? Okay, great. Okay, I think Jeannie's run off with the mic as well, so there we go. So what can you do? Well, I've actually got about 40 questions, so we could start here, because I was very gripped by some of the talks, especially. And I was especially interested by Anthony's backwards causality, and we've talked about this frequently over the last few weeks since he gave me the whole story. And to be honest with you, it's actually shifted my whole brain chemistry somewhat. I don't know if anyone else has get the same sensation when you start realizing that we're not just affected in the future by our intentions and our action, but we're actually affecting the past. It is quite a remarkable effect. So I hope we can sort of delve into that at some point. Hi, Walter. So, has anyone got any questions for the audience, from the audience, for the speakers? Wow. Do you want to take the mic?
Serpents. Is it possible that is it on? Is that better? Can you hear you? Is that working? Maybe people can hear me anyway. Is it possible that the Watcher serpents are the same as the Giza serpents?
When you say the Giza serpents?
Well, the symbolic serpents that are being talked about.
Probably not. No. Can you repeat the question before you answer it, please? May repeat.
We're just getting the mics turned on. Hang on one moment.
Right, I think we're talking about whether the Watchers of Egypt that were described as like walking serpents are the same in an abstract form within the symbolism of Egypt and their image of the serpent. I'd say probably not, is the honest answer. I think that the Watchers of the Book of Enoch were probably described the way that they were, the way that they appeared, possibly even their mannerisms. I suppose there is some chance that they were into the veneration of the serpent, so that would probably enhance the idea of their serpent-like connection. But I don't believe that probably extends into Egypt. I think that the use of the serpent there probably has much more profound mythical things and relates to religious texts to do with the cave underworld and guardians of that, and obviously guardians in general. I mean, obviously the whole Uraeus around the thing is considered to be, a guardian of kingship. So maybe Robert might have a few words on that.
Well, in his talk, Andrew showed a photo of the serpent standing on its tail in the Cryptodendra, and that's a serpent known as the Neheth serpent. He was a friendly one instead of a bad one. And Neheth means to leap up in Egyptian. And so he represented the concept of resurrection, which you are resurrected from the underworld, and that's why he was down in that cryptoral chap. But of course, he managed to leap out of there and escape, I'm sure. I have a question for Walter. Am I allowed to ask a question here?
Yeah, yes, you are. Yeah, just one.
I want to ask a question. Walter, I know this is highly personal, and you might want to just talk about it as consenting adults in the privacy of your home. What do you think the other sun is? A brown dwarf, a black hole, or what?
I think it's Sirius. I do, and I know there's some astronomical issues there in that there are a few stars closer, but given the observations that Sirius doesn't seem to precess like other stars, and given a lot of other information that's a little too lengthy to go into here, I lean towards that. But that does mean that maybe gravity works a little bit different than we think it does, such as MOND, modified Newtonian dynamics, or something like that.
I touched a bit on this possibility when I revised the Sirius mystery, when I wrote about the Anubis cell, as I called it, about the strange connection between our solar system and the Sirius system, which is an astronomical conundrum, isn't it?
It is, and I think your book was, I read it a long time ago, the first one.
Oh no, you need to see the revised edition where I talk about the connection between the two systems.
Okay.
Nobody should buy that old edition. Just because you think you're saving 5 pence, just think what you're losing. 50% more material.
I'll check it out for sure.
Has any more work been done on the series Dogon?
I think
You just hold the mic, and they're all on there.
people always seem to be doing work on the Dogon these days, and I'm very glad about that. My goodness, I can magnify my importance as well as my voice. A lot of people have got into the Dogon, and of course it was mentioned again today. I didn't know about the 9,500-year-old pottery. That's fascinating. I am not working on the Dogon myself, but there's enough there to keep an army of scholars busy for years. I threw out various hints and so on. When I discussed them, they have apparently a system of 40,000 written signs. I still don't know whether anybody's quite surveyed all 40,000, or how many people it would take, how many lifetimes to survey 40,000 symbols of the Dogon. And I'm not really at all sure what the connection between the Dogon is with the people known as the Telem who are supposed to have preceded them. It's fascinating to hear that maybe somebody went from Mali to Egypt rather than just coming from Egypt to Mali. This is all just everything to play for. Really, I would be the last person to say that I had the final word on any aspect of the Dogon. There's a book by Laird Scranton that's come out on this subject to do with the Dogon, and various anthropologists from time to time deal with it. I don't approve of some of the things where people have been trying to say that all the serious lore is just contamination from Western societies. I wrote a lot of replies to a lot of attacks of that kind that were made on the serious mystery. You know, there are lots of people who like to score points off other people's books because it makes them look brave or something, or they can't write their own book. And so I wrote endless replies in the early years to all these objections. The most ridiculous objection attacking the Dogon was by that megalomaniac Carl Sagan, who's just not the sort of chap we'd like, is he? But long may research into the Dogon continue. I wish I knew more about it.
Just like one quick word, sorry. The actual pottery is actually 11,500 years old. It's actually 9,500 BC. But I do think, as you wrote and suggested in the Serious Mystery, that there is a relationship between the creation myths of the Dogon and Egypt. And Laird Scranton, that's how you pronounce it. His book, The Science of the Dogon, is an excellent book, and I really would recommend you get that.
Is there any other questions from the audience? Yes, this guy here. Yeah.
Okay, is that? Oh, yeah, that's okay. Could each of the panel in turn say what they might have picked up extra from the other speakers during the weekend?
Yeah, would Michael like to start that at this end? Any insights of other speakers' material?
Firstly, I picked up that I'm really glad I'm not the only insane person out there. And that there are real scientists and that are insane as well. And it's that the bravery that they come out with and share their information, which is often shot down, as you've just heard, with slanderous emails and people that can't write their own books. And I think it just, I think at the moment we are at a very exciting era of exploration where more and more brave people are coming out and putting their thoughts into books and their research that previously might not have been that kosher or that well received. So that's what I found is just a sense of great deal of support from a broad spectrum of researchers and authors and scientists that are doing some incredible work. And I'm just glad to be here on the stage, sharing my personal discoveries with everybody.
That's one.
For me, the most important is that the knowledge of the ancient is backtracking, is coming to be backtracking very well now. And it is very important for our present and for our future, because they had many cases to face catastrophe and all those kind of things. For example, the ancient Egyptian, I'm working on a book about the ancient Egyptian facing the catastrophe. And it's very interesting because I'm discovering a lot of natural things to face catastrophe, and it's incredible. And I'm I thank very much Hugh Newman and all the public there, because for the first time I think that people is more and more involved in all that, and that's a good sign, like you said. Thank you.
Megalithomania is one of my favorite conferences. I've always been very interested in ancient history, and I do believe, I've always felt that we need to go back to ancient knowledge. We need to go back to the knowledge of life, which was represented by the serpent. In actual fact, ancient knowledge is serpent knowledge. If you speak to any shaman and you go to South America and you say, what is your knowledge? They'll say it's the knowledge of the serpent. It's the knowledge of vibration. It's the knowledge of your DNA. It's the knowledge of life. And the ancient were as spiritual as we are materialistic. And it's a big bridge to make, and we don't really understand what that means because we're so steeped in materialistic thinking from the moment we're born that it is very, very difficult to really understand that. And if you do meet a true shaman, it's very disorientating. I've always considered myself to be on the spiritual side, and when I was asked to speak at a conference of indigenous people in America, and I got there and I realized I was totally westernized and absolutely could not cope with the lack of structure and a lack of timing and doing thing on the whim, doing a thing on the whim, doing the thing. They would just change the role, they changed the timing. So you didn't know where you were, and I find that very difficult. So what I mean by spiritual, I think we have to understand that when we say they were as spiritual, it doesn't mean that they were religious or that they were sentimental. It means they're concerned with the spirit of things, which is the essence of things, which is the nature of things, the true, deep, inner nature of things. So for me, the serpent, if you have serpent in any kind of symbol, it shows that this was a man who had that understanding, the serpent knowledge. So this is a wonderful place to be here. We can only save ourselves if we go back to that understanding, because it's the understanding of life. And the materialistic thinking is taking us straight to the brick wall, as we all know, we all understand that. And we need to fundamentally change our vision if we want to go into a space where we can live and prosper and develop, continue to live on this planet. I really do feel that. So the further back we go, to me, I was fascinated with the South African discovery of 250,000 years ago. The further back we go, the higher the knowledge it seems. And we may think we have achieved a high level, but in actual fact, we've taken ourselves to a brink of quite a disastrous situation. So we really need to connect back, and all this knowledge being brought out today in an occasion like this is very much needed. It's fantastic. Oh, there we go.
I was astonished at the ultra-conservatism of the talk by Michael Tellinger. I mean, he has so far narrowed his field of study that he's down to only 10 million archaeological sites. Couldn't you be a bit more ambitious and make it 20? And but somebody who is really cutting back, and it must be the economic climate, is Walter, because he's going from 25,900 to 25,700 or something like that. I hate to think of the processional period getting shorter like that. It makes me really depressed. But you really didn't make my day, Walter. I'm now worried. Okay, let's get serious. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong word. But I want to say that to me, I hate to show favoritism like this, but the most fascinating talk for me was Marine Gigals. Because of my particular interest in these small pyramids, because I've recently completed a study of the Greek ones, which I'll be publishing, and that's a very interesting subject. But I had absolutely no idea about this fantastic Mauritian stuff going on, all these, I just couldn't believe my eyes. Well, that's what you come here to the Megalithomania conference for, to not believe your eyes, right? And that includes some of us too, and what some of us look like. And the pyramids in Sicily and in Tenerife, I mean, it's just wonderful to know about all that. They just seem to be everywhere, pyramids. I think maybe we really ought to change the name of the conference and call it the Pyramidomaniac Conference. So that was the thing that thrilled me. But then it all thrills me, because I just love being here. Isn't it fun? Mm-hmm. And to be asked to actually talk here instead of just have to sit and listen.
Hi. Well, I'll just keep it brief. I think that from my own perspective, as a member of the audience, you sit down and you listen to all these incredible theories and ideas, and some of them do not relate to the others, and they contradict each other. And in past conferences, it's always wound me up, but I think I've actually got to the point now where I just accept what everybody says and accept that everybody has got a piece of the jigsaw. We might not all have it right, but we're all heading in the right direction. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I would take everything with a grain of salt here and just use our own intelligence to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And I'm an optimist, though. I really think that when we're coming down from a spiritual age to a material age, that it's easier to try to hang on to some of that spiritual quality versus right now we're coming up from a material age to back to a spiritual age, and so we're still hung up on a lot of material things, but things are getting better, and we do have wonderful opportunities here to make the world a better place, and so I'm positive. The one guy whose work sort of set off a fire for me more than anybody else here today, and everything was very interesting and widened my horizons, but it was probably Anthony, because he was just so out of the box with the zodiac stuff, and I think if we are to try to relate and understand the higher ages, we have to get out of the box that we're in, and so he gets my vote.
Well, thank you, Walter. One of the nice things about being on this committee, and some of you I've never met before, but I've read all your books. I've also read both Robert's books, so you'll be so pleased to know I've got that extra 50%. And that set me many years ago on work on the Dogon myself. I went back to all the French literature. I read it all in French, and I found all kinds of new things about the Bambara and various other West African groups, and I started to write a book about the links between these cultures and ancient Egypt, which is partly finished. So I'm seeded by these wonderful people along here, and I hope one day to do so. The trouble is I'm wondering whether I caused it all myself now, which is...
And Walter's work also, and I remember just before Christmas I got his DVD and watched it at Christmas. I actually fell asleep the first time, but I was so tired. But I've watched it since, and I'm delighted to say that he's still saying exactly the same things that he was before. And I'm deeply inspired by all of you. I've heard Andrew speak many times. He doesn't know me personally, but I've read all his books. I've heard all his ideas, and they've been very, very, very influential. And similarly, Francine over the years. And I love this pyramid stuff. I've kind of followed it. I read African Genesis. I read all the kind of black African literature stuff. It's fascinating how it shows. And the Greek pyramids, I got very interested in them. This 30 years of constant curiosity. Your work, Mr. Tellinger, is new to me, and I thank you for it. It's wonderful. God, I mean, you know, I'm supposed to be out of the box. It's so difficult. I'm trying to stay in the box. But I just want to say, one thing. I used to be a psychiatrist, by the way, which helps to stay in the box. But I just want to say one thing, because as you know, I've got a foot in the academic box as well. I have no problem at all about not living in two worlds. I live in one world. I have conversations with academics where there are some things I can't easily say, and I have conversations with my fellow Earth Mysteries colleagues where, you know, the sky and indeed deepest Earth, or the hollow Earth perhaps, is, you know, the limit. But I want to also say, just back to the quantum stuff, which interests me so much at the moment, do get hold of some of these quantum books. Start reading them. The Goldilocks Enigma, read it. Another one which I read on the plane coming across from Canada the other day is a book called Reinventing the Sacred. It's written by Stuart Kaufman. He's an information an information philosopher, really, in Calgary University. He's a kosher scientist. He wouldn't be into any of this stuff. And yet, down the quantum route, through the same kind of weird experiences in his own life, he's having to say, we need to reinvent the sacred. We're going to get nowhere in conventional science until we reinvent the sacred. And here we all are, our feet really solidly in the land. We all love the land. The whole idea of reconnecting with land and culture and finding cultures who left those wonderful things for us to find again. Like Robert was sharing with us, Robert Boval, those incredible cartouches in virtually just east of the Tibesti Range. You know, this is wonderful stuff. And people thousands of years ago leaving these messages for us to find out about and reminding us what we don't have, as Francine and the rest of you are always telling us. I mean, there was so much to find again in our own culture. And it's very, very stimulating. And an occasion like this is just wonderful. Because I walk and chat amongst you all and talk away, and you're all as absolutely mad as hatters, but so am I. And I spent all my time working in a lunatic asylum earlier in my life. But at last I've come home.
So is there any more questions from the audience? Would you like to take the next?
Thank you. This is for Anthony. When I was studying quantum mechanics at college, I was told the quote that if you aren't profoundly disturbed by quantum mechanics, you haven't understood it properly. And I first came across the concept of time-symmetric solutions to the Schrödinger wave equation in about 1995. And I couldn't find any references in literature to experiments that were indicating that the advanced wave, which propagates into the past, was being experimentally verified. Now, you mentioned in your talk that there were some experiments. I think you mentioned it in context with John Wheeler. Could you give me a couple of references? Because otherwise I'm going to have to blame you for the fact that I came up with it in 1995.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, when you've given your talk and you think you're hiding amongst all these Earth Mysteries people, and a guy comes rushing down to the audience and says, I'm a quantum physicist, I thought, because I'm not a mathematician, and I think verbally and visually, but I mean, I don't even understand calculus, but I don't think you need to be a mathematician to understand quantum weirdness. It is something which, I know that quote that you've just quoted to me, I can't remember who it's by, but it is very important. You have to feel totally kind of discomforted by this because it is the basis of reality, and we're all locked into this linear time frame and materiality, and then you realize that everything you're observing or looking at is collapsing into this materiality, and maybe, at least theoretically, if you could look away, it wouldn't exist. And these are ideas which are so counterintuitive that we have not found a way of incorporating them in our everyday culture, even in the West. And I'm challenging you all to, say, get hold of the Goldilocks Enigma or read John Wheeler's autobiography. That's the book to look at. He's got a wonderful chapter in there called It from Bit, which is about bits and IT. It's quite staggering. He's got a U diagram like that. And this is the universe. And there's a big I on this bit here, looking across to the beginning of the universe, which is the beginning of the Big Bang. And it's his model of how we actually, in effect, kind of have some relationship between the beginning of everything and our current perception. And there's an absolutely wonderful model that he suggested, which is mind-blowing, completely mind-blowing. And it is that experiments have been done in the laboratory showing that, you know, if you take a photon or a particle and you split it, and it's then going to either be a wave or a particle. If you look at it or measure it, it collapses into a particle. But because you've split it into another entangled particle, this entangled particle goes on in time after the first particle has been recorded on, say, a photographic plate, whatever it is. So you've got a particle that it's its twin passing on in time after the recording. You then play with that particle afterwards, and whatever you do to it immediately happens to the one before. So you've had a relationship backwards in time. It's been done many times, this experiment, and it's the basis of Wheeler's work. But he now says, well, if that's happening just in, it's about 20 feet long, this piece of apparatus, when you separate these two particles. But he says, supposing you have a photon coming from a distant galaxy. It's coming towards you, and it has to pass a big object, like a black hole, so that it's sort of split into two, and it's got to make a choice between a wave or a particle. And when finally you're sitting in your observatory and it hits your retina, your, as it were, observation of it decide its status, but from its outset, 25,000 million years before. You start to read this stuff and you start thinking, wow. And then you think of what's going on in Africa and what's happening with the pyramids and all this other stuff, and you start to think, wow, how can I integrate these paradoxes and yet truths about reality into earth mysteries? And my way, partly through being a shrink for so many years, is that I'm interested in phenomenology. I'm interested in my experience of the landscape. That's why I shared all those synchronicities with you. Not because they're coincidences, they are, but they're meaningful coincidences for me. And you all know, as researchers, that you have library angels. The books just fall open for you. I mean, Andrew's nodding straight away. You wouldn't get any books written if they didn't help you, would you? Absolutely right. So we've got to look into this. And there's lots. Start with the Goldilocks Enigma, go on to John Wheeler's autobiography. It's all easy to read. You have to read the paragraphs 3 times, of course, each time.
I knew John Wheeler. He was I said I knew John Wheeler. He was really a joker. We should never lose sight of the fact that if you can't laugh at all this stuff, you go crazy. And so I met him on numerous occasions and had actually some pretty long talks with him. He was so funny. And we sort of got on because we both like to make really a lot of jokes, and we were teasing each other. And he was terrific fun, but you must never be humorless if you're a physicist, or you'd go into his asylum.
Yeah.
I'd like to add just to that, I recently did a talk, my tour of South Africa, sharing all this information that we're finding down there with as many people as I can in my home country first, before I take it abroad. So this is the first country other than South Africa that I've actually really come to share this information with. And one of the people that came to my presentation in Port Elizabeth several months ago was one of the leading nuclear physicists in the world. He's at the University of Port Elizabeth, now called the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. And after the, he's actually a good friend, Andrew, you know Peter Wagner, Professor Peter Wagner, and they work together quite a lot. Really top guys in their field. And he came to me afterwards and he said, you know, I really love the stuff you present. It's like amazing. And he wants to get involved in doing research because he's got the top lab in Africa with a lot of incredible equipment there. And so they want to get involved in all the scientific research and the dating processes and all the tests. But he said, I could never present this kind of work that you're doing. And I said, why? He says, because most of the stuff we observe in the lab, we can't explain. And I find that is really sad. If that's the nature of where education is, and I believe that it's the stuff that they can't explain that should be published more than the stuff that they can explain. Because that leads us to ask more questions. So I said to him, please tell me. And he says, no, I can't. I'll get into trouble. It's amazing. So just, you know, because people out on the street, the general public think that, oh, the scientists have got all worked out. They know exactly what's going on. They can calculate this and everything. They got no clue that science is just as much a theory as everything else. And so I just wanted to, for some stupid reason, wanted to share that with you.
Michael, it's also a fact that a lot of the stuff, not to say most of the stuff that we see in daily life, we can't explain. But that, of course, isn't the scientist's fault. The fact is that life is mysterious. Who knows what love is? Can anybody in this room tell me? Who knows what life is? Who knows what electricity is? Who knows what a fire is? Who knows what air is, really? Okay, it's a lot of gases, but who knows what the material world is? Is there another world? Is there that's not material? I mean, what the hell do we know? We don't really know anything. We're all pig ignorant. Sorry, I didn't mean to insult pigs.
Well, yes, okay, I'm thinking. As you're talking, I'm thinking of all sorts of things, but now I'm... Yes, well, my subject, crop circle, which is completely out of this world and is completely so unbelievable that nobody believes in it. I give tours in the summer, I take people in, and one year I had a group of Belgians, and I was giving my lecture, and I said the reason people don't accept crop circle is because it contradicts the law of physics as we know them. And I said it's closer to quantum physics. And there was a man in the audience, and he said, can I say something? And I said, yes. He said, I'm a physicist. And I thought, oh, God, what have I said? You put me on the spot. He said, quantum physics, forget quantum physics. This is way beyond quantum physics. He said, this is something that is putting into question our understanding of time and space. And this is why I have come here from Belgium as a physicist to study them on the ground here to see what is going on, because I am learning from these shapes that we are given in the field. So I was very interested that he thought that quantum physics was old hat.
You know that crop circles can only be seriously considered in the morning because it's called seriology.
I don't get that joke, sorry.
So there was a lady down here who had a question. Is that correct?
Can I add something?
Oh, sorry. That's fine. Yeah, please.
I want to support the scientists because in Egyptology, in archaeology, scientists are making a very good job, but the problem is not the scientist. The problem is the hierarchy of the scientist. But when I went to Sicily and making my research about Sicilian pyramids, I was very happy to have physicists in my team because they were able to explain, it's very complicated, but they were able to explain why and for what use were those pyramids. And it's very, very interesting and very important. And if you are not scientists, you can't understand for yourself what it is. And maybe because we need to make more research on it and to make tests. But maybe it is a system to protect people from the lava of the volcano, which is very, very useful for today.
So, is there any more questions? There was a lady down here, is that correct? Yeah. Would you like to go next, please? You get the mic, please. Okay, wait for the microphone, please. Yeah, cheers.
I was interested in when you were touching on the similarities between the structure of a battery and the structure of the structures that you described. Could you expand a little more on that? Do you actually think they were used for generating energy?
Absolutely, there's no question in my mind whatsoever. They were most certainly used for generating energy. There's a lot more information that I have in my longer workshops and presentations. There's just not enough time to go into it. There's a lot of very fascinating information, measurements of energy fields coming out of the stones, as they are today still. In fact, I think we found a live one that still hums. I'm not joking, I'm serious. A very, very low frequency. We've measured the frequencies. They, at this stage, just very, our initial measurements, we got to do a lot more work, but just to really start to understand what's going on, they range from 200 hertz to 16,000 hertz, the different frequencies of the stones, and that's almost covers the human audible spectrum. I think they actually many of the rocks resonate at different frequencies, which is very difficult to understand. You know, normally one rock would resonate at one frequency. There's some rocks that we found that resonate at 4 or 5 different frequencies. Depends on where you hit them. And the fact that they're all connected became a very important clue to this mystery, because there is nowhere else on Earth where any examples of this nature have been found so far. Each and every one of those original circles is made of the same material, the same stone with very specific principles, content of silica dioxide, iron and aluminium. And we're not the only ones that have measured energy coming out of the stones. Dr. Dan Burish has done some really interesting stuff in the States. He's also on sort of, you could call fringe area of information. As far as I know, he's on a lot of sort of secret black ops stuff for the government. And he's found some phenomenal information and research regarding especially rocks that contain silica dioxide in a specific form. Now we're finding that with the stones here in South Africa. And when you start studying structures that are used in modern day technology in generating energy, there's very little doubt in your mind by looking at the stone circles that that's exactly what was going on. But it gets a lot more interesting, because we start finding that they didn't just use the energy that they generated inside the circular structures. They also tapped into the energy coming from planet Earth, Mother Earth. As many of you may know already, the Earth rings like a bell, and the sound frequency reaches the surface everywhere, all over planet Earth. This is what Nikola Tesla probably found out and tapped into. And this is what these guys were doing 200,000 years ago, before Tesla was doing it. So not only that, and that's actually the main reason why each and every one of these stone circles is completely unique. It is like putting sand on a metal plate and putting sound through it. Each one of those sound patterns will be completely unique. So these guys actually tapped into the sound frequency and the energy of planet Earth at that point and harnessed that energy, and then just enhanced it by, probably, in my opinion, using the Ankh, which is like a tuning fork, a starter, a key to start the circular motion and what I'll call a standing wave inside these structures. And once you got a standing wave tapping into the energy of the Earth, you've got all this conductive material and thousands of miles of stuff going on. You've got an unstoppable energy device. They use this for the mining operations, from levitation to crushing the ore to everything they needed to use it for. No question about it.
Is there any other questions, please, from the audience? There's quite a few people putting their hands up.
Hello, I'm Olivia Temple. I just want
Olivia.
to... you were asking the speakers what they get out of Megalithomania, and I'd like to say what I, as a member of the audience, get out of this conference. I've been to many now over the years, I think all of them, and I want to pay tribute to you, Hugh, for getting together these standing waves and forces of energy.
Thank you.
It's really important work that you do, and you have to go on doing it, and I know how difficult it is to organise these things, and I pay tribute to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot. Thanks. So, any more questions? Edmund would like to take a question. Yeah.
I'd just like to say something really positive in support of the panel, quite from what we all feel about searching for the truth and the secular pursuit of knowledge. But I went to one of the leading educational establishments in the world on botanical research and spoke to the professor in charge. And we were talking about plant hybridation and the origin of crops. And he volunteered this information to me. I'm not going to mention his name because he will probably get the sack, and said, all those people who are involved in looking at tropical plants, and in particular hybridization of plants, we've all realized that you only see hybridization way back 6,000, 7,000 BC, where there were people. It doesn't occur in nature. We now know enough to hybridize plants, but we can't get them to seed. So we know that there was an advanced civilization and advanced knowledge, more than we have today, which was able to achieve that incredible task of grafting plants together and creating new plants and new species. So in terms of our agricultural crops, we now know that our agricultural crops and our domesticated animals were all produced to a very high standard, which have lasted 10,000 years from very high standards of genetic modification. And if we want to know who done it, Francine has hit the button. It was the serpent knowledge. And we have spiritual world, we have a secular world, and we have a religious world. Forget the religious world. So Alan Gardner said there was no word in Egypt for religion. The nearest word was Heka, meaning magical powers. And if we listen to the Druids, who were not religious, they said, we are the serpents, we are the Druids, and passed that knowledge down way back from our Karsag, or Garden of Eden, which you can look at downstairs. But thank you, Francine. The serpent knowledge was very important, and we've had the serpent knowledge taken away from us by St. Patrick, who went to Ireland to remove the serpents, and the Catholic Church, who said St. George killed the dragon. But St. George was an Arian Christian, was cut up in pieces because he was the Bishop of Alexandria. And this was another story of the Catholics who, after they killed George, St. George, they then set fire to the Seraphim Library in Alexandria. And that is why we've lost this crucial knowledge and understanding, which we now, thanks to all of you making your contributions, we're getting back to that ancient knowledge, and that will be the big breakthrough. Thank you, all of you.
I just want to agree with what you said about the evil perpetrated by the so-called Roman Church. We must never forget that the Roman Church was created by a Roman emperor as an organ of state for political purposes. It had almost nothing to do with religion. In fact, maybe religion is the wrong word, because as you absolutely rightly said, the Egyptians had no word for religion. And I don't think that a word for religion should exist because it implies dogma. And as soon as you get an institution, especially a politically created one by an emperor who wants to conquer the world, using this as an adjunct to his search for personal power and vainglory, you're going to have an evil institution. And I look upon the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, as one of the most evil institutions that has existed in the history of this planet.
Any other questions from the audience? There's a lady just in front of you there, Louis. Oh, just put her hand up. Is that correct? You can go next, Louis. It's okay.
You've just opened the door wide open to conspiracy, you realise.
Hi.
We haven't told them about what we've been planning.
Before I ask my question, I'd also like to just recommend a book on quantum physics, which is actually very easy to read. It's by Michael Tolbert, and it's called Holographic Universe. And it's a really good, easy introduction to the concepts that you've been talking about today. And also in the same field, I'd also like to offer my respects to Nassim Harim, who is a scientist and is working on something called the Resonance Project. And he's really worth looking into because he's marrying advanced science, quantum physics, with the ancients. So it's a sort of happy marriage of both things. Regarding my question, it's actually to the sort of Egyptologists, and it's regarding the comet that you brought up, Andrew, in your discussion, the comet about 10,000, 11,000 years ago. The Colbrin Bible, is there any validity to it at all? Because there's a lot of information about, and it's supposedly been taken from writings from the Egyptians about the comet that you're discussing. I've heard that there's some people say there is validity, other people say there isn't. I'm interested in your opinion.
Okay, sorry, how did you pronounce it?
Colbrin,
Colbrin, yeah, I've got a copy.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's a fabrication, it's a confabulation, basically. I mean, basically, it's like an alternative Bible, one that's come out through the sort of the bards, the druids, the Coldee tradition of Scotland, preserved in some monastery somewhere. I think it was supposed to be in Glastonbury, wasn't it, for a while. The manuscript was supposed to be singed where it had been present in the fire here in 1187, am I right, about then? I personally think it's a confabulation. One of the reasons I do, and I'm not going to get into this matter now, is because it follows a lot of modern ideas, particularly about Joseph Arimathea coming to Glastonbury. And I do not want to get into an argument about this with the people here from the lovely Avalon of the Heart, but in my opinion, that just doesn't ring true as far as real history is concerned. And the fact that so many of those ideas are repeated within it says to me that this has to be a confabulation, certainly after the time of the Abbey's high point, so it could even be a modern hoax. So unfortunately, I can't really say much more on that.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any information about that? No?
So it's got time for about two more questions
Yeah,
before
so
we do. Louis been waiting, so he's going to take the next question.
Okay, so hi. So yeah, so basically to follow on from that, actually, my question is directed at the whole of the panel, and to see if we can take a straw poll on Planet X, which is the subject of the Colbrin Bible. And I've recently listening to an audio file by somebody who's pretty sophisticated in his knowledge about the South Pole Telescope in America. In Antarctica. It was built by the Americans. And it seems as though the Planet X is a collapsed dwarf star. And the Druids knew of it as the Frightener, and it has a 3,600 periodicity, 3,600 year periodicity. And that's obviously a whole load of information, and it's very difficult to have any form of way of having a confidence limit on whether one thinks this is true or not. But obviously, if this thing were to fly past the Earth, we would have very serious conflagration, cataclysm, basically. And it does seem as though it is being observed by the South Pole Telescope in X-ray with activated neutrons from this telescope. Is how it's able to see, can only really be seen in X-ray. So, I mean, I know that the binary star hypothesis is obviously a wonderful hypothesis, because more than 70% of our stars are binary. But it seems to me that this would be a perfect candidate, and I'm just wondering, you know, if we could somehow pool our knowledge and deal with that as an overall subject, and that is the Colbrin Bible to an extent, but basically Planet X. What do you think?
I'll take a crack at that.
Good luck.
We are finding new planetoids from time to time, Sedna and Xena, just in the last 10 years, about the size of Pluto, one a little larger. But they're at quite some distance, and I don't really buy this idea that there's any large body that can come within the solar system with a 3,600-year periodicity, because if it's significant enough to disturb things, I think you'd see things very disturbed. It just doesn't make a lot of sense with any of the mainstream astronomers I've talked to. Wish I could be more supportive.
One question based on that. You say that it's supposed to come around every 3,600 years. Is that correct? Is that what you said? When are they saying the last time that it actually came round? What's the date that's given if it's...
Can you get the mic, please, Louis? Can you get the mic to him? Yeah.
What I'm trying to get at is that, you know, what happened at that time. I mean, this sounds very much like a Velikovsky-style idea. I'm just trying to get an idea here of when it was last met. If it's 3,600 years, that was obviously that's not very long ago, basically. So, you know, is it due to come around again? Was it exactly 3,600 years it was around last time? Or, well, if it is, then the date that he gave was approximately 1500 BC, I seem to recall. So we're not due for it for a long while, so don't worry. Right. Anybody else?
Okay, is there any more questions? We've got time for about 2 more questions, then that'll be it for that. So,
I've been listening to all you have to say, and it's all very fascinating. And I've been following along in this, and I've come a long way in my own consciousness, I think, since I was a child. I feel that we live in a universe which is very fluid, in which we individually and collectively co-create a reality. It seems to me that at the moment we're all very involved in science fiction. It's all become the fabric of our reality. I'm thinking about something Peter Russell said about how we wonder how consciousness arrived from matter. And a more appropriate question might be, if consciousness is what is the basis of everything, how did matter arise from consciousness? Now, if consciousness, which maybe some people call God or energy or whatever you want to call it, or the universe, if this consciousness is all that really exists, and we're all a part of that, and it seems to me that then our limited impression of time and space is holding us back, but it doesn't have to hold us back. If we think of time as a kind of time soup in which the past and present and future are the ingredients all swirling together, then it makes sense that we can go back and affect the past. But I'm wondering, like they say that war begins in the psyche, violence begins in the psyche. We live in a universe which is also quite violent. We can see that in space. Looking for nuclear explosions, scientists found explosions in space that were far more severe than anything we've managed to do on Earth. But my question is, if the time is unipresent, if time-space is simply this big time soup, then can we really change anything at all? Or it may be that all we could possibly hope to do is to create a kind of an alpha wave rhythm in the universe in which we are all synchronized to some sort of peace, like an alpha wave brain pattern in the mind of an individual. Comments?
Who would like to answer that one?
Could I go out on a limb here and
you get the
share
mic.
some new information with you? This is probably way off the radar right now, but some really fascinating work I'm doing with a brilliant scientist called Willem de Swart. We're working on a new book called Secret Numbers of God. And I think it's going to take a lot of people by surprise, because I think Willem is probably going to shock the whole world with these discoveries, which are very basic deconstruction of the whole universe, and how everything fits together. And this whole thing of consciousness is very important to all societies and ancient civilizations and our place here in time. I wouldn't want to call consciousness God or anything like that. I'd rather say Personally, no one, I've studied it extensively, and so far I haven't found anyone with any kind of explanation that makes any kind of sense about what consciousness is. So what I'd like to suggest is that consciousness is possibly just the fabric and the material which allows us to find our way back to source, because of there seems to be this insane separation from source. And if we are all one, let's get all really spiritual here, if there is this unity that is the cause and the beginning for everything, then consciousness could be and seems like the fabric that allows us to find our way back to this unity, living in this completely confused and dual and confusing place. And there's some very interesting work done by, I forget the author's name now. But in the Egyptians certainly knew about this crossing over from space-time and time-space, and that information sits in some of the geometric structures that they use. And this is what Willem de Swart has, as you'll find in The Secret Numbers of God, has decoded very, very beautifully. And that information sits in 3 numbers. And I believe that he's actually decoded this TOE, or theory of everything, that eluded Einstein for so many years. And that information sits in the following 3 numbers. That's the number 666, square root of 3, and then that one elusive number 26. And it may not make much sense to you now, but I promise you in time to come it will. His name is Willem de Swart. He's become a close friend of mine. We work together all the time. He's pretty much finished his book, except he speaks science language. I've got to rewrite it into normal language so people can understand it. And it is staggering work. It's decoding everything. It shows you the basic, very simple, fundamental ratios by which everything exists. It taps into all the knowledge of all the greatest physicists that have ever lived and all the greatest information of sacred geometry, and it blends them all together. It's spectacular stuff. And it's very Swart, S-W-A-R-T. But we'll make that available on our website and on zuluplanet.com very soon, but it's really amazing stuff. I'm sure the guys are going to really love it. It really makes you think about the simplicity of stuff.
I thought the number was 42.
Okay, so we've just got time for one last question before we have to say our final thank yous. I think Sean's had his hand up for a little while. Can you get the mic over to him, please?
Hi there. I've really enjoyed all your talks over the weekend, and now being tech for you, I'm going to get my revenge. So I'd like to. It's on. Okay. So I've been thinking about this, and the answer. I actually.
Because your mic's not working.
My mic's not working.
Come in, do it. Get on stage.
Okay. Hello. Hi. So I don't know the answer to this question, but I've got a lot of theories. And all these serpent bearers and Anunnaki and plume serpents and all of this serpent knowledge, do you think they're extraterrestrials?
The cosmic ending, yeah.
4 or 5 on this panel.
This is where you get to rip off your mask, Francine.
I don't see a separation in the universe. We're just all part of the one universe. I cannot understand as extraterrestrial. To me, the universe is one, and we are facets, different facets. We're all part of the same thing, to be honest. That's how I see it. I don't have this feeling of extraterrestrial and all that kind of stuff. We're all part of the same universe. We're all made of the same thing. Actually, our body is residues of stars that have exploded, and the same. I would say, in our universe, in our galaxy, that there is a lot more coherence. We're much more. If there is other life, which I think there is, because I really think that the universe is a manifestation of life, and our galaxy has the same component and throughout. and we're all residues of star. We're made of stardust. So I would think that other planets, other worlds in our galaxy would have a lot more similarity with us than differences. Now, if we change galaxy, I think that would be quite different. So I don't see a boundary personally. I never have felt like that, but maybe that's just me.
I think certain people may know that I've had the occasional thing to say about extraterrestrials, being one myself, of course. As Francine and I actually come from neighboring planets, not the same one. And no, seriously, we have to face the fact that the universe is full of life and full of intelligent life. And most of that intelligent life is a lot more intelligent than us. So we mustn't get big ideas about ourselves. But I think that the idea that so-called intelligent life only exists on planet Earth is the craziest thing I ever heard, because I'm still looking for it, and I'm here. So it's got to be out there somewhere. No, but let's really get to grips with what this means. Any self-reflective consciousness, which is what we could call intelligent life, is going to be, if we talk in simultaneity terms, which I know according to space-time we can't really do, but let's pretend we can, it's either going to exist in a sense that it's behind us in terms of evolution, or it's way ahead of us. So we can forget about the people who are way behind us, because we're not going to be able to be in touch with them because they're still trying to become us, poor things. But the ones who are way beyond us are probably so far beyond us, to cite the often cited law of Arthur C. Clarke, any technology sufficiently in advance of our own will be indistinguishable from magic. That's absolutely true. And I think it's more than just magic or Heka. What we're talking about is people who have transcended the limitations of the physical. And they would, if they still have managed to survive as a civilization, would have become highly spiritualized, and they would probably have mastered the ability to transcend space and time and be in touch with us in a more profound way. Now, there's a lot to struggle against here, because there's a big feedback mechanism on this planet whereby this terrible spirit of evil that reigns over so much of human affairs is in a sense generated by all the evil people out there. And it's like when the speakers aren't working properly here, Hugh and I don't know, that doesn't happen very often, I realize, but we do occasionally get feedback loops here and things screaming at us. And not this year. I can remember this in the That's what's happening in the world. Why do you think so much bad stuff happens? It's because the speakers are screaming at us. And the beings who would be more advanced than us would not necessarily be people that we would contact through SETI programs. And they might or might not be serpentine. Of course, in the Serious Mystery, I give a lot of information about these strange creatures who are described in these ancient records as having what could be fishtails or serpent tails or whatever you want to call them, these amphibians. And there's so much evidence of this, presented at great length in that book, and you probably know about it, that we have to take that seriously, that such beings may very well exist. But it almost doesn't matter what higher beings look like, if they look like anything at all and still look like something, because they're going to be so much in advance of us that what we really need to do is struggle to keep making our own progress. The whole thing that we've all got to contribute, whether we're stupid or wildly intelligent, whether we're ordinary or extraordinary, we're all in this together. We are creating the world story, and we've got to make that a good world story. Everyone's got their role to play. There's not a single good feeling that any of you have ever had of a generous nature, whereby you love somebody, you want to help somebody, you want to do something that's generous and non-egotistical. Every single thing that you've ever done or thought in that respect has not been lost. It survives somewhere. It's all stored up. And every single good thing you've ever done counts. And every good thing that every person does, whatever their level of operating, if it's the village idiot, it still counts. The fact is that it's character that counts at the end of the day, not brains.
Can I just invite you to come back and be our techie next year?
Okay, are you okay with that, Sean? Does that answer your...
Anyone else wants to answer?
Anyone else for comment on that side?
Can I just say something in passing, since I've got the microphone on? I was quite struck by Robert Bauval's story when he goes into the wood in the evening and he hears the flies and everything else, and then he faces the boar face to face. Because as a child, I have done that, having a direct contact with animals, you know, whatever it was, in front of me. And when you're young, you don't see a separation between yourself and with animals around you, the dog, the cat, or whatever, and to face a wild animal like this, where they understood each other, they felt each other's energy, they realized, you know, each other's position. He was able to communicate that he wasn't going to harm the boar, and the boar responded by relaxing and understanding and leaving him alone and walking away. And I think that that was very moving to me to see that there is. It's not just our species that's intelligent. It's not just our species that can feel. And consciousness is the basis of the universe and exists in all levels and in everything. And probably the ancient, actually, if you go far enough, the ancients saw the earth as a living being. They saw the earth as a goddess and the other planets as a god who had temperaments and they can interact with everything. So consciousness is the basis of reality. You see, and good and bad. And it's not necessarily good, but it is conscious.
Briefly, just on the point of the extraterrestrial contact in the past, I think that it would be foolish to suggest that there was not life in the universe other than our own, and therefore it would be really foolish to suggest that it in some way it has not had an effect on the evolution of species on this planet, human or otherwise. That's point one. But secondly, just look at it the other way around. What if we were the only intelligent species in the universe? How unique the human race would actually be. I mean, that would be very, very odd, but just look at it that way, just for a moment.
Anybody else? Just one point to add, that any life form intelligent enough to make it here is certainly aware of the yugas and where this planet is at the present time. And I'm not sure we're of great of interest to them right now, so there's no worries.
I'm just reminded a bit of kind of indigenous people's wisdom at this point, and that is something like we're given a dance to dance. We're in the dance, but our opportunity is to improvise the steps. Keep improvising.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for the speakers. Could we just give a round of applause for all the present and absent speakers of 2010? And before we run through our thank yous, if you could all just stay put for one moment, there's a couple of quick announcements. There was a lost wallet. So if anyone has claimed that yet, great. If you haven't, then come and find us outside. And also, just to remind us...